All right, welcome to the Unbroken Ground Season 2, Episode 37. This is Paul. Thank you for joining me. Hope that you're having a good week, or if you're listening to these back-to-back, that you're having a great day. As always, we'll be breaking down my thoughts on following Jesus, and today the title is You Fool, and I'm going to look at a passage from the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 through the 22nd verse, and just kind of talk a little bit about how I think that if we wanted to live more like Jesus, what that would look like for our world and for our country and just for the times, and how we might do that. Hopefully at the end, a little bit about how we might do that and some of the implication that means for just those who want to be like Jesus. And if you, as always, you can follow me at Facebook /The Unbroken Ground. Email is gmail, theunbrokenground@gmail.com. And I'm kind of pulled back a little bit from Instagram and Threads and all the things. I'm still around a little bit, but I'm not on them very often. If you do want to find me, I'm out there, but I won't respond very quickly if you do end up sending me a message. So, let's jump in. So as I said, I want to consider, at least for a big portion of what I want to talk about today, and it'll all kind of roll together, hopefully. You can determine how successful I am at that after the end, whether you think I was successful at rolling it all together. But Matthew 5:21 through 22, which says that you have heard that it was, and this is the New King James Version, so yours might be a little bit different. But it says, "You have heard that it is said to those of old, 'You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment.' But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whoever says to his brother, 'Raca,'" and there's a footnote here that Raca is Aramaic for empty head, shall be in danger of the council. But whoever says, 'You fool,' shall be in danger of hellfire. But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whoever says to his brother, 'Raca,' shall be in danger of the council. But whoever says, 'You fool,' shall be in danger of hellfire." And if you think through this, I think there's so much here. So obviously, I'm not going to be able to necessarily talk on all things that you find here, but I think that if you think through this and then look at the way our world is and the way that we interact with one another and the way that we approach knowledge and debate and who's right and who's wrong, and the camps that we can sit in and be a part of. I think that you'll find this central truth that's running through. Jesus is taking, it's one of the 10 Commandments, right? This he says, you have heard it said of you of old. It's been taught to you, you guys don't know the old. This is what he's saying to his crowd. He's like, the Old Testament, which was to them was not the Old Testament. He's like, the 10 Commandments. Most of them probably memorized them before they were like 8. They knew. It says, what? Thou shalt not murder, right? But then Jesus says, it's great that you know that, but there's a heart issue here, and this is what he does on the Sermon on the Mount. Like, Jesus is always pushing us to not just be like the Ten Commandments are great and they fulfill the law. They should be followed, right? They shouldn't be broken. They're law because they're a better way to live. Like if you were going to organize your life around a system of what should I do with my life or how should I do with my life, it'd be very hard to find a better system than what you can find in the Bible. Like even if you just didn't believe anything about God, even if you just didn't believe anything about Jesus, but you believe that they set out a good way to live, your life would be pretty good. It'd be much easier. It would be without many of the conflicts that happen because people don't live within those suggestions. So Jesus is like, it's great that you know the Old Testament, or it's great that you know the Ten Commandments, but it's really actually a heart issue here, and so he says, it's as long as you don't. So the idea then becomes, you can do whatever you want, you can think whatever you want, as long as you don't actually kill anybody. That's kind of like the extreme way of walking out the Ten Commandment that says thou shalt not kill, right? Thou shalt not murder. It's like, it doesn't say that you can't hate somebody in your head, or imagining killing them in your head, or dreaming up ways of their demise, or even just dehumanizing them to the point that you don't see them as valuable. And so killing them is not even a second thought. Because this is kind of what happens, right? Like, Jesus goes on to tell a story about the Good Samaritan. And he talks about there's this man who was basically left for dead, and he, because of where he was and possibility being unclean, of course the religious left him. They had nothing for him, and it's curious or interesting. I think that for many people, religion has said we have nothing for you, and maybe not explicitly, but in a lot of ways have said you don't belong, you can't be here, you're not with us. And we have then reinforced that by creating kind of the groups, the camps, the walls, that we've said, you can't, if you believe these things, then you can't be a part of us. And if you vote this way, if you support a particular political party, then you can't be with us. And both sides do this. This is not just a conservatives are divisive. No, I mean, conservatives, Democrats, liberals, Republicans, whatever, we've all learned that it actually is, in a lot of ways, more beneficial, because what happens in these groups is that the most extreme voice usually wins, and so the moderate voices get pushed out, because the easiest thing to do if you want to win over a group, or you want to be in charge of a group, is to basically accuse your opponent of not being whatever that group is. They're not Republican enough, they're not conservative enough, they're not religious, they're not Christian enough, they're not Calvinistic enough, they're not conservative theologically enough. And so so you almost have to you almost have to cater to the extremes of groups, because the almost constant underlying challenge to that is somebody who's going to take up a more extreme position than you, and then challenge you for not being extreme enough. This is something that unfortunately we see a lot more on. A lot of times you see this more on the conservative side. You see For example, someone like the former president who will say you're a rhino, which means that really you're just a Republican name only. You're not ideological enough to really call yourself whatever litmus test you want to have for that. And so people have learned, because again, the game of politics is to get elected. It's most of the time, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, 99% of the time. It's not really to, there may be some altruistic motives in there, but a lot of times, especially if you're talking about senator or House representative, president, like it's a very lucrative thing. And so you want to be elective, and so it's elected. And so you almost have to, reach the most common denominator. And so that's what our world sees and knows and understands. But what the Sermon on the Mount, I think, teaches us and shows us is that murder is not just the actual physical act of ending somebody's life. That there's actually a heart issue there when you think of them, and if you allow your heart to say, if inside you say, "You fool." And I think you have to unpack that a little bit, and you kind of have to wrap your head around what Jesus is saying with that. But I think for me, what it means is that if you allow yourself in your heart, in your mind, to think of somebody as simply either unintelligent or just so foolish that they don't deserve your respect or your compassion or your care, then in your heart you have done the same thing spiritually and mentally as you would do if you were just to murder somebody. And Jesus puts it in that stark of terms. Like he's like, it's great that you don't outwardly going around killing people. That's really good. The Ten Commandments definitely says don't do that. But he's like, but in your heart, if you are writing people off as not worth considering being human, you fool, you're not worth my time. You don't have anything to offer. You don't have anything to love. You don't have anything to value. Then you are risking, basically committing a spiritual act of dehumanizing, which is really like being you. It's really, honestly, if you look at this historically, that the way that some historical atrocities have happened is that what public figures have done is that they've dehumanized a certain group, and then they blame them, a certain race, a certain ethnic group, a certain religious group, whatever, and then they blame them until to up the point that people who generally maybe are good people and don't even have a problem with them they've accepted the dehumanizing of that group, that they will not think anything of the terrible treatment that then the people in authority might do. And this repeats itself over and over again. This is, historically, this just happens over and over again, where we allow people just, even though they don't necessarily agree or wouldn't necessarily treat somebody that if it was their own personal interaction, but they also don't necessarily step in or say or have anything to say when it's happening in their country, in their city, in their town, in their church. Um, and so there's actually just this huge danger, I think, of ignoring this part of what it means to follow Jesus. And that's allowing anyone in your heart to be less than human, to be thought of simply as just a fool. Um, and it's almost actually like this point in your heart where it goes beyond hating them. You don't even hate them. They're not worth that. They're not worth that time. They're actually just not worth anything. And um, and I have some theories of why I think that happens. So I'll tell you. Although I'm not a fully trained psychologist or a psychiatrist or any of those things, just human nature judgment as I watched how people interact and as I think about my own life. So not everything I say may necessarily be 100% accurate or true to every situation, but I think there's just a general sense that I think is biblically backed up, that if we allow ourselves to slip into this place, then it's a dark place that we've allowed ourselves to be a part of. It's darkness. It's not life. So here's what I think happens. As a general rule, all of us as people don't want to be outcast, or the group that is, or part of the group, or part of, or the person that the group focuses on for things, for when it comes down to like being, whether you belong or not. And I've seen, and so let me expound on it a little bit. What, in a healthy community, this is not such a super big problem, but a lot of times our communities are not fully healthy. So, for example, if you if you are in a conservative community and you have some ideas that maybe don't fit, a lot of times you get you get called a heretic, or you get ran out of town or got ran out of the church because you didn't fit, right? And so people a lot of times are like, well, I don't necessarily, a lot of times would be like, I don't necessarily disagree with it, or I don't have strong opinions on what that person said or did, but I'm not going to stand up for them, because if I stand up with them, they're going to run me out of town too. And I think the story that in my life that just really super illustrates this is that, and it's a story that a friend told me. But there was this kid. So his friend is running a ropes course. They're at the top of a zip line. This kid gets up there. He starts being afraid and scared and starts crying. And he can't go. And so one of the things that they can do on this course is be able to let that kid kind of step back, and then let somebody go ahead and like, oh, watch this person, see it's not so bad. And so, a couple of people go, and then another kid gets up there, and that kid's still watching, the first kid's still watching, and the one that couldn't go and was crying, and this kid sits down and he can't go. And the kid who was scared to go suddenly starts making fun of the kid who can't go. And it's a survival thing, because you don't want to be the weakest person. And so that kid was feeling weak, he was feeling vulnerable, and so the thing that he did is he attacked somebody that he could regain his sense of power, and he could turn, if he felt like the group or whatever his community, he could turn that against that. Like, and you just want to go, but you were just in this situation. And that kid's probably like, yeah, but I'm gotta protect myself. And I think that's true of what happens in a lot of communities and a lot of people when they're faced with decisions about what to do about someone, and there's a majority or an authority who is trying to mistreat them, or it feels like this is the right thing to do. Maybe it's not even mistreating them, but it's just like they're taking an action, and a lot of times they will be simply unmotivated to help because they don't want any of the attention turned back on them. And when this happens, we feel justified because, hey, we're not the ones doing it. And so, but in our hearts, a lot of times what we do is like, well, that person, they shouldn't have got themselves into that situation. They're fools. And I think that sooner rather than later, we very well could be dealing with situations like this in the United States. You know, I don't know who's going to win the presidential election, but I do know that there's one candidacy that's run very hard on they're going to be deporting immigrants as soon as they can. And when they were formerly in office, they separated kids from their parents. And I don't have all the right answers or know all the right answers. But what I want us to consider and think about is that we need to be sure that we're not saying in our hearts, you fools, I don't know you. Why would you come here? What you came here illegally. So I owe you nothing. And we think of them as less than human. And so, you know, I don't know the right answers necessarily, but I do think that there seems to be at play this idea of demonizing immigrants, a race, a culture, something that's separate from us, and then blaming them. And this just doesn't historically work out very well. And I'm sure that within those cultures and those people who have fled the terrible situations that they are fleeing, that many are praying, God, I'm trying to find a place that there are believers, that there are people who are trying to figure out life and trying to provide a better life for their kids, and who are going to be swept up in a very calloused political operation, possibly. And at some point, I think as Christians, if not this election, then maybe next, or maybe but at some point we will have to decide what do we do? How then shall we act if people are being displaced? What's our responsibility? You know, we always think that the United States should be a Christian nation, but then I ask the question: would a Christian nation separate families from their children, mothers from their babies? Would they would a Christian nation spread lies and hate about immigrants and people of different colors, and you know, and I'm not saying that, honestly, I'm not saying Democrats have a better answer, but I mean, I think what breaks my heart is that there may be some issue. Let's say there is an issue with the way the system works now, but you know, right now there is a concentrated effort to stir up hate for the Haitians in a town in Springfield, who most are here on political asylum, and when confronted, with the fact that these stories may not be true, rather than saying, "Oh, I'm sorry that we shared information that might be false," they're like, "We don't care." That's like, that's what breaks my heart when I think like there's conservative people who fall in lockstep with that and don't ask the question of like, what do you mean? If it's not true, don't say it. And you know, and the fact that we, the fact that we kind of blindly be like, well, they're still better, even if they are, telling lies. They're still better than the other party, and then because and this is why I think that a lot of times, like I just get so disappointed sometimes because we demonize the other party, the conservatives do for sure, and then pretend like, and even act like the people, the current president, vice president, are less than human. Like, you may not like who the president is. You won't always like that. But I think as Christians, we're still told that we should pray for them. And then if you look at the Sermon on the Mount, even if you consider them an enemy, Jesus says, love your enemies. And yet I think we push them, oftentimes we caricature them, the other party, and this goes for both sides. And then let's be for sure here that this is not just a conservative thing, but I hang out with a lot of conservative people, and so this is what I see. We demonize and we caricature, and we allow our hearts to say they're just fools. They're just fools, and in our hearts we're like, we don't care what happens to them. And Jesus comes back in and he's like, hey, if your heart's not right when you're thinking about those people, then you're not any better than someone who commits murder. And people are like, whoa, hold on. That can't be what Jesus says. But it is what Jesus is saying, because Jesus understands that the majority of us are not going to kill people physically. But the heart, which the Bible tells us, is deceitful. And it is where the uncleanliness comes. Like Jesus says, so much of the religion of his days was like touching the outside things were what caused the uncleanliness. He's like, but where does it come from? It comes out of the heart. And so he's like, you must be more concerned with your heart. And I think we've bought too hard into this idea that as long as we support the right political party, as long as we're in the right in crowd, then it's okay what we do to other people or what we think about other people. Jesus is, Jesus will forgive us, and he will, but Jesus doesn't have anything to say for that. And I think that's actually where we miss the boat. Jesus has a lot to say with how you treat people, especially those that you consider your enemies, or especially those that are outcast, especially those that are not part of the in crowd. I mean, it's why he would go on to say, Treat others as you want to be treated. The golden rule, like that we're supposed to all learn. But I think that because we allow our hearts to think of people that are not like us, that disagree with us, we think of them as fools. Oh, you're just missing the boat. You're just dumb, right? Like that's how we often allow our hearts to think. It's how we allow our minds to cope. Like, oh, that person has different ideas than me. Well, that's because they're stupid. It's because they're dumb. It's because they're fools. And our hearts wrap around that and we're like, yeah, and they're not worth my time. And Jesus is like, no, those are the ones that you need to learn how to love. It's easy to love your friends and the people who say the same things as you. Go love your enemies. And he means it. And he means it. Why? Because he knows that the healing of your heart, the darkness of your heart, and getting rid of that and like shining that light in there, actually comes when you live out what he says, and start to really deal with the things that are deep rooted in your heart that are sinful, and then that are a nature that allows you to say things like "you fool." It is. I mean, it's just this. Our world is just continues to show. Just continues to show that we have no problem with dehumanizing people. And I mean, I don't know what side of the spectrum you guys show up and land on with, like, Tyreek Hill and the last week he had this arrest thing happen, and you can say there was some wrong on both sides. That's fine. Yeah, sure. There was disrespect that happened that went both ways. That's fine. But no one deserves to be treated that way. There are, whether or not, and I'm not trying to throw stones here at that officer. I think that everybody has moments where they wish they could do better, and I think at the end of the day, if he were to sit down and to really, if you were really to talk to him, and I don't know him, and I don't know Tyreek Hill, I mean, but if at the end of the day, if you were to sit down and said, oh, I wish this would have gone different, and officers of the law should be experts at de-escalating situations, and instead this one was an escalated situation, not necessarily fully because of what the non-officer did, but by what the officer did. And it wouldn't be right if it was a white person or a black person or a Hispanic person to be exiting your vehicle and to be thrown on the ground and to have a knee in your back and to be like sitting down and saying, oh, I've just had knee surgery, and they're like, oh, stop crying. Like there's levels in there that, sure, you know what, if you're dealing with somebody and there is a safety issue and this is how you need to deal with that, that's different, right? That's different. But if it's a you disrespected me issue, and so I'm going to humble you issue, which is what it seems like it was, then that's not how we should treat each other. It's just not. It's not how Jesus would have us treat each other, and so but our world pushes us into these camps that we suddenly have to be like, oh no, you gotta support the officer because you gotta support the police, and I think they have a terribly hard job, but I do think that they should be experts at de-escalation. Like I worked in a call center. There are ways for you to, even on a phone call, where you can de-escalate a situation or escalate it, and the person on the other line might be terribly rude to you, but this doesn't give you the permission to be terribly rude back, or to escalate the situation further. As best you can, you tried to de-escalate, and that's not what happened there. It doesn't define. I hope, and I think it shouldn't, but it doesn't define somebody's career. But I think it's a societal reality that one of the things that the church has failed at is teaching the decency that we should love and care for each other with. And I didn't even go look, so you can do your own research if you want. But there will be some conservatives, some pastors, who simply will come out and say that the officer was in the right and Hill was in the wrong, and so he did nothing wrong. And I think there's just like, I think because they would say, we're for law enforcement and we're conservative, and I think the church has a much softer and a much more unique voice that it could offer, which is both of them should have treated each other as they wanted to be treated. But because we allow ourselves, and I think more than ever that I have seen, we've allowed ourselves to think of people in our own country like we're supposed to be country like together, like we're supposed to be countrymen side by side, and women, and we've allowed our hearts to be like, those people are my enemies, the others, and you can fill in others to whatever you want. But here's the thing, like if you read the Sermon on the Mount, our enemies are the ones that we're supposed to go out and love. Like, cool, we found enemies, great, figure out how to go love them. And instead, we've allowed to do what Jesus said here. It's like, oh, great, you haven't actually physically killed anybody. That's commendable. But have you let your heart begin to think about somebody that you don't like the things that they say, so you've begun to go, you're a fool. You're not worth my time. You're not worth my care. And we have murdered them spiritually in our hearts. We've allowed hatred in. We allowed to hate somebody in our hearts. Well, I didn't physically abuse them. I didn't physically kill them. I didn't try to kill them. We've dehumanized, and it goes on both sides. Like I think, today there was another attempt possible to assassinate former President Trump. Like, and part of it's because it's a dehumanized thing. Those are the dehumanizing of the heart has bled over into people physically trying to do it. And it needs to not be a part of how we as a country, we as a nation that's supposedly connected to following Jesus. That's not how we should operate. And the hatred, the things that come out of that, like we have to figure out how to change those. And until we do, we're going to struggle. So here's the challenge. I don't know where you find yourself on the spectrums of politicians and conservatism or liberalism. I would guess that most people are. I don't know. I don't know who listens to this, I hope I didn't offend everyone, and now you guys will stop listening. But it's just a challenge to think deeper and to realize that on the other end of those arguments, the things you don't like to hear, the things you don't agree with, are people who are trying to figure out life as well. And there are some people who just simply are broken And so it's not just that you have to, this is not a, you have to accept everybody's idea kind of thing, but instead it's like you have to figure out, how do I see them as a broken human whom I can love, and where can I speak in truth and love and help them. And one of the places that I think that like conservatives need to step into is like, if people are spreading lies because we believe in the truth, if you that's what you say, if you're spreading misinformation and lies, then as a conservative to another conservative, you should say, hey, that's not true. Hey, stop spreading that. Hey, that's a lie. That's not proven. Rather than to go, oh, well, it's just a fun thing, or it's not. It maybe it won't be true. I mean, that's what, like, that's just so disappointing for someone to say, like, because it doesn't affect you. It's like, oh, well, I don't have to work with that, because we allow our hearts to be like, yeah, because those people are fools. I don't have to do anything for them. And Jesus says, if you dehumanize people, for whatever reason, then your heart has some death in it, and you got to be careful. His words. But I think if you want to follow Jesus, then one of the things you have to do is you have to take that light and you have to shine into your heart and get all the darkness out. And it'll bury itself in the corners, and you've got to take it and you got to get the darkness out. Because the darkness is death, and you want to be life. And so that's why Jesus says, yeah, great. It's great that you don't physically murder anybody, but in your heart, how are you doing? So that's the question. In your heart, how are you doing? And then how will you allow Jesus' word to transfer how you treat every single person that you come across this week? Will you see them as beautifully created children of God? Because they are creation. They are God's children. They may not belong to the family yet, but they can. Maybe you're the one that helps and invites them into that. But they're still God's creation, and they're worthy of your respect and your care. And if they're enemies, if they line up against you, then guess what Jesus says? He says, go love them. Is that hard? Yeah. Do it anyway. Oh, that person, they don't believe anything like me. They're a liberal. They believe so many things that's not like me. Go get to know them. Go figure out how you can bless them. Right? I mean, this is what Paul says. He's like, go figure out how you can encourage them and bless them as a person. Doesn't mean you endorse everything they do or believe or say. But most of the time, they have some of the same struggles, issues that you do. And Jesus is like, great for you to love the people that love you, right? That look like you, that act like you. It's easy. Go love your enemies. That's what it means to follow Jesus. At least a part of it. And if we're falling down on that, then we're missing a part of following Jesus. If you want to be like Jesus, here's what you do. You go and you love your enemies, and you don't allow your heart to become hardened and to dehumanize any person to where you could just look at somebody and go, oh, you're a fool, and you make fun of them mercilessly because it's become okay, because they're the other. And a lot of times we do that because we don't want to be that. We don't want to be the outside person. We don't want to be the person being made fun of. And so our heart, the darkness in our heart says, let's hold on to that, because we'll be the person that gets made fun of if we stand up. And Jesus says, go stand with the lost. Go stand with the hurting. Go stand with the broken. That's what Jesus did. Hope that helps you find a place to contemplate this week. I pray that you'll find some people that you can go love, that you found it hard to love last week. But because you want to be like Jesus, you're going to do that this week. Bless.